by the power of Grayskull.
You think you knew He-Man? Nah, fam, you barely scratched the surface. I'm about to drop so many what the actual Eternia facts on you, you'll be side-eyeing Prince Adam for the rest of your nostalgic life. So buckle up your furry boots, hold aloft your magic sword, and scream it with me. I have the power to blow your mind. Let's start off with everything you thought you knew about He-Man probably isn't true. So get this, Prince Adam, aka He-Man, is literally half Earthling. His mom, Queen Marlena, straight up NASA astronaut. Yeah, she was on a solo mission to Europa when, boom, her ship crashes on Eternia. King Randor finds her, says, hey girl, marries her, and boom, He-Man is born.
You need rest. Return with me to my palace. You shall be my guest while you recover.
A few days, you said. But I fell in love with you, and with this planet. And I just couldn't bring myself to leave.
Bonus twist, in the original DC comic crossover, they had to explain how He-Man knew Superman, and it's because Marlena told little Adam bedtime stories about the Man of Steel. Imagine being tucked in at night with tales of Kryptonian uppercuts. What a flex. Even worse, imagine your worst enemy is actually your uncle. Okay, we need to talk about Skeletor. Evil, ripped, and somehow kinda sexy in a haunted skull kind of way. But here's the real plot twist. He's He-Man's freaking uncle. That's right, in the 2002 reboot, it was made clear that Skeletor was originally Keldor, King Randor's ambitious brother.
How long I've waited for this, Randor.
Keldor wanted the throne, got denied, threw acid at Randor because subtlety is overrated, but it backfired, literally. His face melted off. Enter Hordak, who saved his life and transformed him into this blue-skinned bonehead we all know and love. So now, instead of ruling Eternia, he spends his days shouting at Beastman and being roasted by his own minions. Thanksgiving in that family? Awkward. Now here's where it gets even better. The legendary Alan Oppenheimer was the voice of Skeletor. Not just Skeletor, he also voiced Man-at-Arms, Cringer, and Merman. That means the guy was often having full-blown conversations with himself in character in completely different voices. Skeletor arguing with Cringer, that was Oppenheimer yelling at Oppenheimer. And get this, he created Skeletor's iconic screechy tone by blending the dramatic flair of a Shakespearean villain with the creepy edge of a goat.
The same fate awaits all who stand in my way, especially He-Man. Now, here is what we will do.
Seriously, that unforgettable voice wasn't in the script, it was all him. Even more mind-blowing, he was Vanity Smurf in the Smurfs. Yes, Skeletor was also a Smurf. And if that isn't range, then I don't know what is. Oh, and remember Falcor, the luck dragon from the Never-Ending Story? Yep, that's also him. From I have the power to never give up and good luck will find you. Oppenheimer was all over our childhoods. Born in 1930 and the man is still going strong, even voicing Skeletor again in He-Man Revelation well into his 90s. Absolute legend. Let's talk skin. Skeletor isn't wearing blue armor. Nope, that's his actual skin. He's a Gar, an ancient race with blue skin who assassinated the original King Grayskull. In some stories, Randor and Skeletor were brothers, with the same dad, but Randor got the throne because Skeletor was blue. Yep, full-blown space racism. On an even worse note, did you know one of the main characters was secretly battling brain cancer while delivering all her iconic lines? Now let's talk about Teela, because she's way more important than most people give her credit for. Sure, He-Man was the sword and the catchphrase, but Teela? She's the legacy. She's the future sorceress of Castle Grayskull. That's right, while He-Man's out there tossing boulders and dodging laser beams, Teela's on track to inherit literal ancient magic.
Looks like these dragons aren't so bad after all, when Beastman isn't controlling them.
Take him back, Teela.
In some versions, she's the sorceress' secret daughter. In others, she's a clone. And in the 2002 reboot, her dad might be Fitzo. I repeat, someone wrote Fitzo in the script, said it with a straight face, and everyone just rolled with it. But behind that fierce warrior voice was the incredibly versatile Landa Gary, was basically the entire female cast of the show. Seriously. At times, she voiced up to 5 different women in a single episode. Teela, Evil Lynn, the Sorceress, Queen Marlena, all her. She gave each character their own vibe, using nothing but vocal tone and a bit of accent work. When asked how she pulled it off, her answer was pure legend. Improv, baby, and coffee. Lots of coffee. And she wasn't just talented, she was tough.
I wish I could believe you. I just don't think I'm special enough to do what you do. I don't even know why I was picked to substitute for you.
Linda Gary continued voicing roles even while battling brain cancer. Talk about real-life heroism. Her Shakespearean training gave characters like the Sorceress and Evil Lynn a depth that stood out from the usual Saturday morning fare. She didn't stop with He-Man either. Gary voiced Jane in Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, tackled roles in She-Ra, Spider-Man, and his amazing friends, and yes, even the Smurfs. One woman, an entire universe of voices. Total queen. Now switching from queen to king, sorry to tell you this, but He-Man wasn't as tough as you think. The next fact will have you looking at him completely different. Think about it. He-Man never actually hurt anybody. Seriously, not once. Across 130 episodes, he never stabbed anyone with that legendary power sword. He barely even threw a punch. What did he do? He threw villains into puddles, barrels, and the occasional mud pit like it was his part-time job. The sword? Mostly a glorified flashlight for cutting ropes, zapping rocks, and looking majestic in the sunset. Why so tame? Because the show was under heavy FCC scrutiny, and Filmation had to keep it squeaky clean. Every episode ended with a feel-good PSA like, don't bully your little brother, or maybe don't throw acid on your siblings. Real lessons for real kids. But here's the wild part. The guy voicing He-Man, John Irwin, wasn't even a full-time voice actor. He mainly worked in television production and only voiced characters on the side. Despite that, he nailed the role.
I hope the rest of you will leave the moon in peace.
Forget it, He-Man!
You might recognize his voice from elsewhere too. He was Reggie Mantle in the classic Archie cartoons and even voiced Morris the Cat in those iconic 9 Lives commercials. Yeah, from sarcastic feline to the most powerful man in the universe. Talk about range. And if you thought he had a whole studio crew hyping him up, nope. He recorded nearly every He-Man line solo, tucked away in his tiny supply closet at Filmation, with zero direction and no co-stars to play off of. Just him, the script, and his imagination. Most animated series use ensemble casts, or at least let actors bounce off of each other. But Irwin was out here summoning the power of Grayskull completely alone. But here's a bit of behind-the-scenes drama. When the 2002 He-Man reboot came around, they didn't bring Irwin back. Instead, they gave the role to Cam Clark, who, to be fair, is a legend in his own right, but fans were not having it. Irwin's voice had become so iconic that the change felt like a betrayal to many longtime MOTU diehards. How did you feel about this? Let me know in the comments if you felt betrayed too, or if you didn't even notice. Orko, our favorite floating magical nuisance with a heart of gold and a spellbook full of flops. Originally, this clumsy wizard was named Gorpo, but that got changed pretty quick. Why? Because animators realized that if they put a big O on his shirt, they could flip the animation and reuse it without the letter being backward. That's right, Orko's name was changed for cost-cutting reasons. Genius-level cheapness.
And now for my grand finale. I call my latest trick, eggs over easy.
And speaking of budget hacks, guess who voiced Orko? Lou Scheimer, the executive producer and co-founder of Filmation. Yep, Orko was literally voiced by the man who made the show. He didn't stop there. Lou also voiced a bunch of other characters, believe it or not, under the fake names like Eric Gundon, so the studio could dodge union rules and avoid paying extra actors. Using aliases helped him stay under the radar while voicing multiple roles. Basically, Orko wasn't just a character. He was corporate cost-cutting personified. But Lou wasn't all loopholes and shortcuts. He was a legit talent. He performed the musical bard intros in Black Star and even sang background harmonies in other Filmation theme songs. So yeah, next time you hear Orko flub a spell or crash into a wall, just remember, that squeaky chaos gremlin was brought to life by the same guy running the whole show, saving money and singing behind the scenes. Legend. She-Ra, He-Man's twin sister, had a sword that could turn into anything. A rope? Sure. A boomerang? Why not? An ice maker? Yes. because you never know when Eternia runs out of ice for your magical margaritas. Melendi Britt, the voice of She-Ra, had to scream over 100 times and nailed it every time.
I am She-Ra!
She also voiced Catra. That's right, She-Ra and her evil ex, same voice, iconic. Her vocal range was so intense, some people on set thought they were hearing two separate actresses. But behind the scenes, total mystery. Melendi was notoriously private, never breaking character, and vanishing from the spotlight between projects. Oh, and here's the creepy twist. She was also Batgirl in the ultra-obscure 1977 New Adventures of Batman, a show so rushed and underfunded that scripts were sometimes recorded before they were even finished. Years later, she popped back up in Robot Chicken and made a blink and you miss it cameo in She-Ra and the Princess of Power, a haunting little reminder that the original voice of Etheria's greatest hero was still watching from the shadows. Let's pour one out for Stinkor, the smelly villain who never made it into the cartoon. Why? Because the producers thought he was too dumb.
Call me Stinkor!
This coming from the show that gave us Snout Spout, the firefighter elephant. The toy smelled like patchouli, like literally. The stink was so baked into the plastic. Some Stinkors really reek to this day. That's commitment.
Get your soap stinking fingers off my merch, you dirty merc!
Stinkor never had a cartoon voice, but in the fan parodies, he's often voiced by Cam Clark, voice of Leonardo in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who later voiced Prince Adam in the 2002 reboot. So yes, Leonardo the Ninja Turtle became Prince Adam. Cross-universe blow up. Speaking of cross-universe, can you imagine why He-Man would have anything to do with Spider-Man? Listen to this next fact and you'll see why there's a huge connection that almost ruined one of them. And now, possibly the most insane fact. He-Man is the reason why we didn't get a Spider-Man movie in the 80s. Canon Films had the rights but instead spent all their money on Masters of the Universe and Spider-Man 4. Both bombed hard, so Spider-Man had to wait a few decades to get his web-slinging big break. James Tolkien, who played the villain Detective Lubick in the He-Man movie, is also Principal Strickland from Back to the Future. So yeah, He-Man shared screen time with the guy who yelled at Marty McFly. Respect. Here's where things get wild. Erica Schemer, daughter of Filmation producer Lou Schemer, wasn't just hanging around the studio, she was secretly voicing tons of kids and background characters on He-Man and She-Ra, all before she was even old enough to vote. And get this, because of tight budgets and union restrictions, she often worked under the table, uncredited and unpaid for early gigs. But her real gut punch? Erica was a closeted lesbian, working in one of the most conservative corners of 1980s Hollywood. She had to hide who she was for fear of being blacklisted, while working on shows all about justice, truth, and fighting oppression. Years later, she finally came out publicly, became a fierce LGBTQ+ advocate, and even returned as a voice cameo in He-Man Revelation, reclaiming her space in a legacy that almost erased her. From space moms to smelly villains, reused animation hacks to shocking voice actor careers, it's safe to say He-Man was weirder and wilder than we ever knew. So now that you know He-Man's uncle is a blue space racist and She-Ra's sword doubles as a kitchen appliance, what's the weirdest or funniest He-Man moment you remember from your childhood? Drop it in the comments, I'm ready to laugh. And if you love this ride through Eternia's madness, like the video, ring the bell, subscribe, and I'll keep bringing you the juicy, weird, and downright awkward truths behind your favorite cartoons.
This decade from to Mumm-Ra!
ThunderCats had a rhythm you could almost set your Saturday morning to. Lion-O calls the Sword of Omens, the ThunderCats rally. Mumm-Ra comes up with some over-the-top scheme, and by the end of the episode, order is restored. Even the danger felt safe. The villains lost, the heroes smiled, and the kids could go back to eating their sugar-loaded cereal without a second thought. But in the third season, something strange slipped through. An episode so bleak, so heavy, and so relentlessly destructive that it felt less like a cartoon and more like the end of a ThunderCats world. It's called The Last Day, and it's one of the only episodes in the entire series that feels like it could have been pulled from broadcast for being too much for kids. Today, we're going to break down exactly why, scene by scene, this episode stands apart and why it still hits harder than almost anything else ThunderCats ever did. And if you want to watch it for yourself, I've linked the complete ThunderCats DVD collection in the description. It's the only way to see The Last Day in all its apocalyptic glory. Also, if you enjoy these deep dives and want to help keep them coming, you can drop a super thanks right here on the video. Every single one helps me keep digging up these lost, shocking moments from the cartoons you grew up with. And trust me, after this breakdown, you will never look at ThunderCats the same way again.
1,000 years more! 5,000! You cannot defeat me!
It all starts with Mumm-Ra at his absolute lowest point. No master plan, no grand theatrics, not even his trademark cackling confidence. Instead, he's desperate. The once terrifying sorcerer who spent seasons terrorizing the ThunderCats is now reduced to standing before his dark masters, the ancient spirits of evil, like a condemned man awaiting judgment. And these aren't your average cartoon villains. These are literal nightmare fuel, ghostly figures entombed in glowing coffins, with booming, echoing voices that sound like they're coming from somewhere far deeper than the Black Pyramid. They've always been cryptic and menacing, but this time, there's no riddle, no drawn-out warning. They're done with him. They hit him with an ultimatum that feels less like a challenge and more like a death sentence. You have one day. Destroy the ThunderCats or be destroyed yourself. This isn't Saturday morning villain banter. This is an execution order. And here's where the episode takes its first shocking turn. Instead of panicking or running off to concoct another scheme, Mumm-Ra does something chilling. He accepts without hesitation. He doesn't even ask why. He just demands more power. The ancient spirits oblige, but this isn't his usual ever-living transformation. This time, it's grotesque. His body mutates, his muscles bulging to inhuman proportions, jagged armor materializing like shards of dark metal, and his face twisting into something far more animal than human. His eyes burn with a new feral light, and his voice drops into something that sounds less like magic and more like pure rage given form. It's the kind of transformation scene that makes you lean forward as a kid, not because it's cool, but because you're not entirely sure if you should be watching it. And then comes the moment that cements just how far gone he is. In a single act of self-destruction, Mumm-Ra destroys his own Black Pyramid from inside out. For casual viewers, it's easy to miss the weight of that moment, but the Black Pyramid wasn't just his lair. It was his fortress, his source of power, his anchor to the ancient magic that kept him immortal. Watching it crumble is symbolic. The ThunderCats equivalent to the Death Star detonating before the final battle. It's Skeletor torching Snake Mountain. It's like watching a king set fire to his own throne, smiling as the flames consume everything. I don't know about you, but it freaked me out as a little kid watching this. It's not strategy, it's not necessity, it's a message. Mumm-Ra has stopped caring about everything except total destruction. From this point on, the stakes aren't just high, they're final. From that moment on, The Last Day stops feeling like a regular ThunderCats adventure and turns into a full-scale visual onslaught. The second Mumm-Ra steps outside, the world itself seems to recoil in terror. The ground shudders violently, like the third Earth is trying to shake him off its surface. Towering volcanoes erupt in the distance, vomiting fire and ash into the blood-red sky. Rivers boil, entire mountainsides crumble away in jagged landslides. And then there's the color shift, a sudden plunge into deep, almost hellish tones. The comforting greens and blue of the ThunderCats world are gone, replaced by oppressive reds, blistering oranges, and the heavy blacks that swallow every inch of the screen. It's like the planet itself has been dragged into something from some other dimension, one where hope doesn't exist. This definitely wasn't your typical Saturday morning cartoon peril. Usually, destruction in ThunderCats was over in seconds. A wall collapsing, a harmless laser blast, maybe a toppled tree. Quick, clean, forgettable. Here, the devastation is prolonged, we linger on villages splintering into rubble. The camera sweeps slowly over massive chasms opening in the earth, swallowing forests whole. There's a weight to every shot, like the animators wanted you to feel the loss. For kids watching in the 80s, these weren't just flashy background effects. This was environmental annihilation. It felt like the entire ecosystem of Third Earth, every mountain, every forest, and every creature was being erased in real time. And just when you think it's all spectacle, the sound design hits you. The bright, triumphant hero music is gone. In place is this low, droning hum that feels like it belongs in a disaster film, not a cartoon about colorful cat warriors. It doesn't just fill the silence, it seeps into it, making every second heavier. It was the kind of world-ending tone shift that you would feel in your chest. And yet, the destruction was only the beginning. Because what Mumm-Ra does next doesn't just target the land, it targets the ThunderCats themselves in a way they've never faced before. Mumm-Ra's rampage isn't random. All the destruction, all the chaos, it's leading somewhere. Because for all his newfound power, he knows one truth. Take out Lion-O, and the rest of the ThunderCats will crumble. So he starts hunting. The episode does something brilliant here. It slowly isolates Lion-O from the others. Panthro is across the planet, trapped in collapsing canyon. Tigra is holding back a tidal wave threatening to wipe out an entire coastal village. Cheetara is deep in the forest racing to save animals from a wildfire. One by one, the team is pulled away, each dealing with their own slice of Mumm-Ra's manufactured apocalypse. And then there's Lion-O, all alone. The landscape around him is eerily still, the air thick with ash and heat. The colors are muted now. Scorched browns and dirty grays replacing the fiery palette from earlier. You can almost feel the silence pressing in until Mumm-Ra appears. Not with a blast of magic or dramatic speech, but like a predator stepping out of the shadows. His movements are slow, deliberate. He knows there's nowhere for Lion-O to run. The confrontation is quick and brutal. Lion-O barely has time to raise the Sword of Omens before Mumm-Ra unleashes a spell so heavy, so crushing, it turns him to solid stone mid-strike. 1 second, he's a warrior in battle. The next, he's a frozen statue, sword raised, eyes wide, every muscle locked in place. And here's the part that really sinks in. Lion-O is conscious. He can see, can hear, he just can't move. He's forced to stand there, completely helpless as the world continues to fall apart around him. Talk about scary. Am I the only one who has had nightmares about this being me before? I know you might be wondering, so where are the rest of the ThunderCats? Still scattered, still fighting their own losing battles. And with every second that passes, the sun inches closer to the horizon, because once it sets, Mumm-Ra's temporary godlike power will vanish. The entire episode becomes a race against time, but the odds of anyone reaching Lion-O in time feel impossibly small. It's tense, it's claustrophobic, it's the kind of setup that makes you lean forward wondering, will they get to him before the sun disappears? Or will this be the day the ThunderCats finally fall?
Come on, Thunder Kittens, I'll get you!
The moment Lion-O is sealed in stone, the tone of the last day shifts again. The fast-paced destruction slows to a crawl, but not in a way that gives you relief. Instead, the tension becomes suffocating. This is no longer about Mumm-Ra blasting apart landscapes or chasing his enemies. Now, it's a waiting game. The camera keeps cutting back to Lion-O's frozen form, the sun hanging in the sky like an executioner's blade. Each time we return to him, the shadows have grown a little longer. The heat from the day is giving way to the cold of the evening, and in the background, you can hear the low, ominous hum of the score, almost like the planet itself is holding its breath. The rest of the ThunderCats are still out there, but they're fighting a losing battle against the clock. Cheetara is trapped beneath falling debris. Panthro's thunder tank is half buried in a landslide. Tigra is stranded on the wrong side of a crumbling bridge. Even Snarf, usually the comic relief, is caught in a scene that plays uncomfortably straight, desperately calling for Lion-O with no answer. The genius of the episode is that the tension isn't coming from what's happening to Lion-O. It's from what's not happening. He's early still. The Sword of Omens is just out of reach of his transformation call, and Mumm-Ra knows it. He circles the stone prison like a wolf around a trapped animal, occasionally leaning in close to whisper things Lion-O can't respond to, taunting him, promising that when the sun dips below the horizon, there will be nothing left of the ThunderCats to save. And the sun keeps sinking. Every cutaway makes you hyper aware of that dying light, the warm glow creeping toward the edge of the screen, a visual countdown you can't stop watching. You start to wonder, will the rescue come at the last possible second? Or will we actually see the unthinkable happen? Because the way the episode is playing out, for the first time in ThunderCats history, victory doesn't feel guaranteed. And that's when The Last Day delivers its most shocking move yet. An ending that refuses to give you the comfort you're expecting.
En unos momentos el ojo de Thundera será mío para siempre, muchacho.
If you thought regular Mumm-Ra was scary, Last Day Mumm-Ra is pure nightmare fuel. This isn't the crackling sorcerer we've seen 100 times before. This is Mumm-Ra stripped of his theatrical posturing, amplified into something primal and monstrous. His voice is deeper now, gravelly and guttural, every word vibrating like it's being dragged across rusted steel. There's no smug banter, no gloating monologue. When he speaks, it's short, sharp, and dripping with venom. And when he doesn't speak, he roars. Not a cartoon villain laugh, but a feral, animalistic bellow that makes the air feel heavier. His attacks are different too. Normally, Mumm-Ra fights have a kind of mystical flair, bursts of magic, flashy illusions, conjured beasts. Not here. This time, he fights with brutal, unrelenting physicality. Every movement is purposeful and punishing. He doesn't just knock down walls, he tears through them like paper. He doesn't just strike at his enemies, he slams them into the ground with enough force to rattle the camera. You can feel the weight behind every blow. There's one scene in particular that shatters a long-standing rule of the show. Mumm-Ra storms the ThunderCats' lair, their home, their sanctuary, and rips part of it apart with his bare hands. The walls splinter, the ground shakes, and for the first time in the series, the lair feels vulnerable. It's a violation on a level no other villain had ever dared to attempt, and it sends a clear, chilling message. Nowhere is safe anymore. But the darkest moment comes when Mumm-Ra turns his attention back to Lion-O. Still frozen in stone, unable to speak or move, Lion-O becomes less of an opponent and more of a trophy, something for Mumm-Ra to play with. He circles the stone prison slowly, dragging his claws over the surface with a screech that sounds like nails down a chalkboard. It's the sound of deliberate cruelty, the kind that makes you squirm. Then, leaning in close, his voice drops to an almost intimate whisper as he promises what will happen when the sun fails you. The words are chilling, delivered not for the audience's entertainment, but for the sheer satisfaction of tormenting his helpless prey. It's a scene that feels almost too intense for the target audience, less cartoon villainy and more psychological horror. And just when you think Mumm-Ra has reached his peak of intimidation, the episode takes one more step into territory ThunderCats had never experienced before. A step that makes the final moments of The Last Day feel like the point of no return.
¡Tenemos compañía!
The final minutes are burned into fans' memories. The sun dips lower and lower. Mumm-Ra, standing tall, prepares for his victory. The other ThunderCats fight their way back, but it's too late. The screen fills with red light as the sun touches the horizon, and we fade to black. No triumphant music, no ThunderCats Ho battle cry, just the eerie question, did they survive? The next episode doesn't even directly address the events in the same way you'd expect. That gap, that lack of closure, is part of why this episode stands out so much.
Holy Thundera, look!
Mumm-Ra, bigger and uglier than ever.
In the mid-1980s, the idea of a cartoon episode being banned was rare. Saturday morning shows were carefully designed to avoid anything that could spark outrage. No graphic violence, no heavy political messaging, and certainly nothing that could leave kids genuinely disturbed. The formula was simple. Keep the tone light, make the stakes high but safe, and always hit that reassuring reset button before the credits rolled. But The Last Day didn't just bend those rules, it all but shattered them. The destruction in this episode wasn't quick or stylized in the way most cartoon peril was. It was prolonged, detailed, and unsettling, lingering on entire landscapes being torn apart, villages reduced to rubble, and the environment itself reacting in terror to Mumm-Ra's unleashing power. It didn't feel like a fleeting backdrop to an action scene. It felt like the camera was making you watch a world die in real time. Then there was the shift in power dynamics. For nearly the entire runtime, Mumm-Ra wins. Not just in a he's ahead for now kind of way, but in a way that makes it clear the heroes are barely holding on. This wasn't the usual dance where the villain gets the upper hand for a few minutes before the tide turns. This was a sustained, crushing dominance that made it feel like the ThunderCats were truly outmatched, something children's cartoons almost never allowed. The psychological weight of the story made it even more intense. Trapping Lion-O in stone for most of the episode wasn't just a plot device, it was a horror setup. The hero wasn't simply in danger, he was conscious, aware, and completely powerless, forced to watch the destruction unfold with no way to stop it. It replaced the thrill of an action sequence with the dread of a ticking clock, stretching that tension to the point of discomfort. And when that clock finally runs out, there's no neat resolution. The episode ends without closure, without victory, without that final beat of safety that kids in the 80s had been trained to expect. The credits roll not with relief, but with uncertainty, and for many young viewers, that may have been the most disturbing part of all. It was a tonal swerve, a leap from toy commercial fantasy into something bordering on disaster cinema. In an era when most parents wanted cartoons to be bright, cheerful escapes, The Last Day was the opposite. Bleak, oppressive, and unwilling to hold your hand. And while it did make it to air, you can easily imagine how, in the wrong market or with the wrong timing, this could have triggered the kind of parental backlash that got episodes pulled from rotation entirely. And yet, as unsettling as it was, that edge, the very thing that made it feel too much, is also what has kept this episode burned into fans' memories for decades. But there's one last thing about The Last Day that doesn't get talked about as much. A subtle, almost hidden detail that might be the boldest move ThunderCats ever made. And when you notice, the entire episode takes on an even darker meaning. So, what do you think? Was The Last Day a masterpiece of high-stakes storytelling in a kids' show, or a huge overstep that risks losing its audience entirely? Let me know your take in the comments. If you want to rewatch it, I've linked the complete ThunderCats collection down below. And trust me, watching this episode now as an adult makes it way more intense than it ever felt back then. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the forgotten, darker corners of your childhood cartoons, hit like, subscribe, and drop a super thanks. It keeps these breakdowns coming and helps me dig up even more moments that might make you go, wait. They aired that on Saturday morning? Because on Third Earth, sometimes the end of the world happens before breakfast.
Then let our powers combine. Earth, fire,
Wind, water,
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet.
You remember Captain Planet as a mullet-rocking eco-superhero summoned by 5 multicultural teens shouting, "Let our powers combine." But what if I told you this colorful Saturday morning cartoon once went so far off the rails that a single episode was nearly wiped off television entirely? An episode so disturbing, so intense, it blurred the line between animated fiction and real-world tragedy. It was season 3, and everything changed. By the time this episode was over, one teenager was dead, millions of viewers were stunned, and Captain Planet had crossed the line no other kids' cartoon dared to approach. But to understand why this episode caused such a stir, we have to go back to the early 90s, when Ted Turner had a vision that shocked the industry and tried to save the world, one cartoon at a time. The year was 1990. The Cold War was ending, grunge war was rising, and cartoons were still mostly about transforming robots and anthropomorphic turtles. Enter Ted Turner, media tycoon, eccentric billionaire, and hardcore environmentalist? Yeah, he wanted to change the world, starting with Saturday mornings. So, he created Captain Planet and the Planeteers, an animated call to action disguised as a superhero show. It wasn't just about entertainment, It was a mission to teach kids about zone depletion, oil spills, endangered species, and deforestation. Each Planeteer represented a continent and a natural element. Kwame with earth, Wheeler with fire, Linko with wind, G with water, and Mati, the most mysterious, with heart. Their powers combined to summon Captain Planet, the green-mulleted eco-warrior who could literally punch pollution in the face.
For now, I'll handle Greedly and the spill. You can help those animals.
Right! Go!
It was cheesy, it was peachy, but it worked. For a while. Because Captain Planet wasn't just fighting pollution, he was fighting a rising tide of apathy. And while the early seasons were hopeful, later seasons got heavier, reflecting real-world urgency. As the series matured, so did its messaging. The writers started getting bold. Episodes addressed racism, nuclear arms, even HIV/AIDS. They weren't afraid to rattle cages, but nothing compared to the moment they decided to take on drug addiction. And that's where our story takes a very dark turn. Season 3, Episode 1, titled Mind Pollution. Sounds tame, right? Like a metaphor about social media or peer pressure. Wrong. The episode centered on a highly addictive functional drug called bliss. And unlike other cartoon drugs that made people sleepy or act silly, bliss was portrayed as devastating. The episode begins with Linka visiting her cousin Boris in a gritty urban neighborhood, already a departure from the usually lush natural settings of other episodes. But something's off. Boris looks jittery, paranoid. He's hanging with a rough crowd that seems more after-school special than environmental villainy. Enter Verminous Scum, a grotesque, rat-faced humanoid whose presence alone is unsettling. But this time, he's not spreading pollution or disease. He's pushing a product, a pink capsule that glows ominously. He calls it Bliss. And when people take it, their eyes glaze over. They stumble around in euphoria, but then comes the crash. Tremors, hallucinations, rage, addiction. Boris becomes hooked almost instantly.
Go on, get Bliss now. Nothing can bring you down now.
The episode escalates fast. He steals from Linka, he lashes out, he spirals, and then he overdoses. Yes, he dies. On screen. In a kid's cartoon, Linka finds him, tries to wake him, holds his body, and sobs. It's one of the most graphic and emotionally raw moments in any children's show ever. Even Captain Planet shows up too late to help. He stares down Verminous Scum with fury, but even his powers can't undo what's been done. And just like that, a Saturday morning cartoon became a grim cautionary tale about addiction, death, and consequences. When Mind Pollution aired, the backlash was instant. Parents flooded the network hotlines with complaints. Too traumatic, they said. Too dark. Too real. Stations in some markets immediately pulled the episode from syndication. Others added content warnings, a first for many animated shows at the time. This was the first Saturday morning cartoon with a TV PG rating. Some teachers and advocacy groups praised the boldness. Finally, they said, a cartoon that tells it like it is. But others accused the show of traumatizing children and exploiting tragedy for shock value. And this wasn't a fringe episode buried in the middle of the season. This was the season premiere. A statement. Captain Planet wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore, he was fighting for souls. And the writers weren't pulling punches. But why go that far? Why risk backlash and bans? To answer that, we need to look at the enemies Captain Planet was truly up against, and how the show used horror to reflect real-life fears. Most cartoons gave us mustache-twirling villains or aliens with goofy accents. Captain Planet, on the other hand, gave us psychological horror in pastel colors. Take Dr. Blight, a rogue scientist with a face half covered by metal. She's brilliant, calculating, and remorseless. One episode reveals she poisoned her own sister with radiation in a test. Oh, and she's voiced by Meg Ryan, making her the most disturbingly seductive villain on TV.
Au contraire, my rambunctious rodent. With my new invention, the Planeteers will be our best buddies.
Then there's Hoggus Greedly, a corporate caricature of greed, gluttony, and unchecked capitalism. He drills into pristine landscapes, dumps waste into oceans, and laughs as he profits from destruction. He's not just bad, he's real. And finally, Verminous Scum, the villain of Mind Pollution. He's a humanoid rat with yellow teeth, red eyes, and a voice like nails on a chalkboard. He deals in fear, disease, manipulation, and death. Some episodes even imply he's spreading a virus that resembles AIDS. He's not just gross, he's terrifying. These weren't just villains, they were allegories. Every one of them personified a real-world threat: corruption, pollution, addiction, nuclear war. And kids felt it.
The whole world will be one big scumball, led by me and my gangs.
So when Scum introduced Bliss, it wasn't just a cartoon drug. It was a monster that millions of families recognized. And that made it too close to home. Captain Planet didn't want to sell you toys. It wanted to sell you responsibility. The creators knew they were walking a tightrope. They could either wrap their messages in bright colors and humor, or they could hit kids with a new, raw, painful truth and trust they could handle it. And incredibly, it worked. Over the years, countless scientists, activists, and educators have credited Captain Planet as the show that opened their eyes. It wasn't just about saving whales, it was about saving us. The show tackled genocide, climate collapse, bioweapons, hate speech, illegal animal trafficking, and child labor. One episode had children held hostage in a war zone. Another showed Captain Planet melting in radioactive waste, screaming in agony. Imagine seeing that on a Saturday morning cartoon. Well, it happened. These images weren't fantasy. They mirrored real headlines that kids saw on the news, or lived through. And Mind Pollution? That was the episode where the consequences were too personal to ignore. Boris didn't just die. He represented every teen lost to addiction, every cousin, sibling, or friend who never made it out. Viewers remember that scene not just because it was tragic, but because it was the first time a cartoon admitted that actions have irreversible consequences. It didn't blink. It didn't offer a reset button. And in a world full of sugar-coated lessons, Captain Planet stood alone, treating its audience not like children, but like the future leaders they would one day become. Pretty powerful stuff for a cartoon from the 90s.
That's why it's so important to burn less of those fuels that pollute the atmosphere and make Earth hotter.
Can people stop this?
We must. The power is yours.
So, was Mind Pollution too dark for kids? Or was it exactly what we needed? Today, most cartoons play it safe. But back then, Captain Planet asked the big questions, and sometimes it answered them with tragedy. The show didn't just entertain, it educated, it challenged, it warned, and it left a legacy that echoes even now in environmental policies, school curriculums, and yes, the haunted memories of kids who watched a beloved character die in the middle of a cartoon. Did you see the drug episode when it aired? Did it scare you, educate you, or both? Drop your memories in the comments. I'll be reading all of them. So if you grew up on cartoons that weren't afraid to get real and want more deep dives into the wild, weird, and sometimes shocking truths behind your childhood favorites, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Trust me, the next one might blow your mind even harder. The power is yours.